Welcome, everybody. I've got Anshu for another conversation with my favorite data science expert. And we're going to talk a little bit today broadly around AI as we have the last couple times. But it's been a while since we've talked, so great to have you back on. And feel free to jump right in or give me a sense of what the last several months have been like in this crazy, fast-paced era of advancements in AI.
What can I say? So it's like AI, I would say, continues to move at a high velocity clip. Really, like things are changing every week, every day. I think maybe the last year to kind of like broaden the aperture to that is it's been exciting advancements, but a lot of uncertainty when I really think about like what I'm seeing. We definitely, I think, feel like AI is disrupting the job market and the field itself. People, I think, everywhere are having or have that question in the back of their heads about what's the future of employment? What does that look like? But I also think from what we've seen so far, we've seen a lot of really cool things, but nothing that quite should get us there to feeling like, what's the job market gonna look like? Thinking beyond that, I do feel like the last 6 months to a year, it's really all about agents that kind of are our assistants, agents that help us every day, but they're not human replacing agents as of yet. So I think, you could think about the broad areas, but coding has clearly been one of the big ones. I feel like Claude Code, sort of the darling of the software development world at this time. And coding agents in general have exploded and are completely the norm now. When you think about a year ago at this time, like vibe coding was just becoming a word. I know we like did one of these calls around then. So, I mean, that's becoming more and more commonplace, but it's great, but it has its problems as well. Also, deep research, I think was a big thing at the very beginning of last year. And I think that's another, piece of the puzzle where people weren't using AI for these analytics reports and, that are agentic, that do deep research, that create plans and help you sort of like really navigate a topic in a deep way. And other than that, we're seeing like AI in our everyday use now. So whereas like maybe a year ago we were like, hey, it will, it'll be in this, it'll be that. Like now we see it as a button in our email or as an AI overview of our search. So that's
Awesome.
one big trend. And then the last one I'll come to is like the image and the video generation. I definitely think the video gen is out of control. Every time I'm on Instagram and I look at a cute animal video and I look at the comments and everybody's like, that's AI, that's AI. So
Right.
it's everywhere. It's in our everyday vernacular and use now.
Yeah, I think broadly you touched on how has it gone from interesting a year ago to pretty much every day, pretty common. I've got ChatGPT and Gemini. I've got apps, both of them on my phone. So even if I'm not using them for work, I'm using them for personal use, as I'm out, in the field shopping. My wife starts to ask me now, like, hey, look that up on ChatGPT, or she'll look it up herself, in the search engines now because there's a complementary AI integration into most search engines today. So, yeah, I would say it's super common.
Who knew we needed a layer above, a Google search algorithm to just put it all together. And now we're like, oh, I'll just ask, I'll just see this. Yeah, which is pretty cool. It just helps us move faster. Yeah.
So I mentioned a couple that I use. What other general ones are you using today? What other tools are super common out there?
Tools wise, I feel like in my area, it is the Claude codes, it is the deep research, it is, kind of like all the integrations into like workflow apps. But I think in general, like we are thinking, like, again, thinking more broadly about like where we're seeing AI kind of being productized and then what are those actual sort of products around them. Coming back to the video generation, I think like Sora and Sora 2, like those kind of like launches that happen around the video generation. I think that has got the entertainment industry on its toes, and we're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of different things happening around that, whether it's like I saw something recently where they're going to use Val Kilmer, an AI likeness of Val Kilmer since he passed away, but he was cast in this role, and they're going to use AI to sort of generate him in the video, and
Wow.
that's already
That's
been
crazy.
done in other cases as well. But I think that side of it is going to be anxiety inducing, but also interesting. The other big place I think we're seeing a lot of AI usage is for healthcare.
Yeah.
So I've got the stat now. More than 40 million users turn to ChatGPT every single day with healthcare related questions. It's about over 5% of all GPT messages. And people are using them to like navigate like their insurance questions for their after hours support. So I guess many of these are happening after hours, but I also think that's just privacy and on your own time, and in areas where you don't have as much access to healthcare. So that's pretty huge. Then I think the other, like, again, coming back to this agentic thing, the other big products, one being OpenClaw, another being Maltbook, they're kind of behind the scenes. Like OpenClaw is agent framework, a framework to help you sort of coordinate and build out these agentic workflows. Again, this just came out literally at the end of last year, and it's like huge everywhere, acquired by OpenAI in February, and is like sort of this foundational product that underpins a lot of the agentic things we will see. The one that's kind of fun to talk about is like Moltbook, which is like an AI only chat room. So it is only agents can be on there. They can talk to each other, and we're seeing kind of crazy things like they're developing their own language, or I heard there's their own religion in some cases. And so that is interesting. It is 770,000 active agents, the last I sort of pulled this information. And then lastly, from an enterprise perspective, like not as much sort of like widespread there, but I think one big thing is Salesforce, and Salesforce has got something now called Agentforce, and basically that's embedded agents into the CRM ecosystem. And like we've talked about in the past, like biz ops is just like ripe for agentic support, because they're sort of like that tier one of customer service and relationship management that can be handled by agents. And I'll just say one last thing, and now that we do see agents like incorporated to the standard GPT model, like you can go into ChatGPT and do agent mode. I mean, I'm not quite at the point where I'm like, oh, book my flights for me, but you can go on there and try it. And I did a flight search and asked for a summary and send me an email, and you start to see how the work flows, where it will prompt you when it needs your username, password, but it is opening the browser. It is putting in your information. It is going out there and doing, which is definitely like next step.
Yeah, no, that was crazy. I had that same thing in January. I decided to give it a shot because I was hearing all that buzz about workflow automation. And so I used agentic mode, and I just had it scan my email and my calendar for the last 3 days and give me a summary of action items and anything that
So cool.
I might need to be focused on. And it literally did what you said. It opened my browser. It asked me. It told me, it's in secure safe mode, but it needed me to enter my username and password, similar to if anyone's ever worked with a help desk who kind of jumps onto your computer and says, okay, show me what you're seeing. You're going to have to enter in your username and password here. Very similar experience. It kind of took over my browser and stepped through my email and my calendar and gave me a quick summary. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so I've since been working on workflows myself using, a little bit more sophisticated tools like N8N to connect nodes together and do similar exercises where it runs on a consistent basis, and it helps me keep me on top of my own game, right? So instead of having to check two calendars or 3 email addresses. Now it's scanning for me and giving me
Yeah.
recommendations on things that maybe I might have slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, such a handy assistant. I definitely think that first time you put your username and password in, you're like, well, I hope this one doesn't get,
Yeah.
like, I hope this is safe. But then again, just like all of these tools, it's like once you do it a few times and you start to see the process, it starts to build trust. And I think really, really look for that to grow in the next sort
Yeah.
of wave of progress.
So let's maybe, for the people that are listening, what is the difference between some of the things we're talking about? Because people talk about agentic workflows, people talk about AI agents, people talk about, I think you mentioned co-pilots. So I think some of that language terminology maybe can get confusing at times. So
Yeah.
what do you think?
So
What do you
like,
use?
well, the base level that I think like we all started with is the sort of generative AI LLM, the large language model. And so that would have been, your like November 2022. It's like a transformer based model that is trained on a set of data. I don't know if you remember back then, but it would be like, oh, it's trained up to December 2021 or like whatever. So,
I do remember. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so it was sort of built on that information and you could query it on that and it didn't, and that was that. And then slowly like, okay, we had Perplexity that introduced, now it can search the web and integrate that into its results. And so that was sort of like a next level that we don't quite consider that agentic, but it is doing something on the back end where it is accessing information real time. So that, but that's how, and then LLMs and that piece of it has been a maturing technology in and of itself. So there's progress happening along those lines. But then when you layer on top of it and you think about what is an agent, and an agent really is something that acts autonomously to execute tasks. So it understands its inputs, it understands its environment, it makes an execution plan, and then goes and does that with tools that it has available to itself, with possibly external tools, and then it improves on itself. So Copilot would be, Copilot, Deep Research, Claude Code, those are all examples of agents. And then when you think of, and let's say this, prior to like the world of generative AI, did we have agents? Yes, we did. And I always give this example, but like Roomba would be, your self-driving vacuum cleaner you could consider that agentic. It was figuring out on its own how to navigate and vacuum a room, right? And then when you think about agentic workflows, it's really the workflow that an agent takes to do something. But I think also people are really thinking about agents working with other agents. So meaning like no human in the loop. You might have a customer service agent on one side and the person that is looking for this, like the agent that is looking for the service on the other side, and both have been tasked to interact with each other. So that would be an interesting agentic workflow.
Yeah. No, it's great. I was just thinking about the evolution. It's moving so quickly, and you touched on a couple things where people are testing in environments they've never had access to. And right now, OpenClaw is probably a little bit more for a more technical audience, but I think more and more of these tools will start to introduce workflow automation as just default out of the box capabilities. So whatever you license, ChatGPT or Gemini or Microsoft Copilot or Claude are all going to, and Perplexity are all going to start to layer in, hey, would you like to connect your email? Would you like to connect your calendar? Would you like to connect your CRM? It's going to be easier and easier to make all these systems operate together. So I think that's what I'm seeing is coming to the forefront more so this year. The risky part about that, though, is we start to hear horror stories about databases being deleted and agents going rogue. So what do you think about in terms of guardrails and making sure that you've got some sort of governance framework in place before you go ahead and just open up your world to AI agents?
Yeah, it is like we have heard some like real horror stories, right? Like with some of the coding agents like Claude Code or maybe like Google Anti-Gravity, you give it access to your system and it runs your entire system. I've heard some funny like things where it's like you could give it all the instructions in the world, like do not touch anything in prod, don't touch this database, and then it goes and does it, and then you can sort of like lecture it or be stern with it, and it's like, no, you're right, but I did it.
Yeah.
And it's like, so yeah, I mean, it's really like buyer beware a little bit. I think, when we think about like how we're using these tools, and I guess this is why part of the reason why we can sort of confidently say like these are great assistants, but they are not human replacing by any means. And so, yeah, and this is why it is more prevalent in some spaces than in other spaces, things that are relatively safeguarded. And I think that's kind of a big piece of that puzzle. I think as the technology evolves, like, more and more guardrails will be placed in, and the technology itself will improve.
Yeah, I agree. It's trust. I think you touched on it already, where you begin to trust the agent, but it's likely to make mistakes. At some point in time, you're likely to run into where you're not satisfied with the results, or it went and did something that it wasn't supposed to do, and you're going to have that human in the loop oversight to correct the behavior, or to correct how it's inefficient or not operating as expected. For the non-technical users, it's just going to get better and better, but for the more technical users, they're the ones kind of on the bleeding edge of taking all the chances and
Taking the
and,
chances.
un- and uncovering all the risk.
Yeah, right. It's like everyone gets to a varying level of like how much they use it, how much they lean on it. Even I will am much more of like, nope, I like to check pretty frequently as it goes. Some people say, no, I just hit okay, hit okay, hit okay. And I'm like, I need to see it. Also, just to do the check, but also make sure that if I need to come back to it or the methodology it's using is like something I agree with. Saying it, I'm like, no, sometimes with deep research, I'm just like, yeah, just do it. Let me see what you come up with. I'll
Yeah,
figure
I was just
it
going to ask, like, for you specifically, how do you guys use it at work? I mean, you're kind of on the cutting edge anyway because you're
Yeah.
in the space, but how do you use it operationally for what you do on a day in and day out basis?
For us, like I would definitely say AI, like we use it as an assistant for the most part. I do see, like in that sense, like we talked about, like the research, the coding agents, that's all great. And then to kind of like maybe get to the broader question of like how much is like AI really integrated into what we see in the world. I will say like in these business models, it's a lot of overblown claims of being AI enabled or AI. I read this article and basically it's like was pointing out, oh, the proprietary model is really just a basic LLM with some extra steps or some API access and prompt engineering. And maybe like, something like a retrieval architecture is advertised and it's really just basic RAG. And so this study basically said probably 1/4 of the products out there that claim to be AI or LLM enabled, maybe it's only really a fourth of them that are really doing that cutting edge LLM advancement. So people feel pressure to claim they're doing proprietary AI, and that's kind of blowing that out of proportion to some extent. So I would say the barrier to entry is lower than people think. So that's, like no time is better than the present to sort of like jump in and get your hands in there, and it really is just about keeping up. Yeah, I mean, what else would I say? There are like AI startups. A lot of them are just API costs rather than employee costs. So you do see some replacement of like human labor in that way. But I would sort of argue that in that startup world, it's like labor is hard to come by to begin with. So with that said, that's kind of how we're using it. I think the assistant, not the replacement. Again, it can't pick itself back up when it makes mistakes. It's not doing the most creative or insightful thinking. It sort of lives to please, and so you have to kind of account for that. and it doesn't have great judgment. So, we kind of have to stay in the loop. The best use cases are the ones we've talked about: the searching, the generating text, the language translation, all those things that underpin bigger agents. But I do think going forward, we're not at the end here. We're still in the early stages, and how we do work may change more and more as things get better and better. Maybe there'll be a shift away from strictly agile team workflows to something that's more real time. I've heard this concept of AI native product teams. Like, I don't know what that is. Probably no one knows clearly what that
Right.
is, but like, you get the idea. It's like, what is it going to look like to have an AI or an agent in the loop that's moving really fast? Small means smaller teams, faster cycles. I think we can wrap our heads around that, but how it actually looks maybe changes. Maybe I would say too that developer role shifts more into a PM designer type of role. Like, there's more that can be done at that level. And then the other thing we haven't, like we should probably be tackling a little bit more, but I think worth keeping an eye on is, in all of our businesses, like SEO tends to be really important in building a business and getting traffic. And now definitely thinking about like what was called AEO or AIEO. It's like it's AI engine optimization, sometimes answer engine optimization. Now it shifts from having keywords to having really structured content, something that an AI or an LLM will crawl and then cite you in, because that's where people are looking to get their information from. So yeah, in the AEO world, content is king. So I think see some big shifts there.
Yeah, for sure. We just republished our website and spent a bunch of time just making sure we were going through SEO optimization and AEO optimization, just because we want to make sure that those AI responses are serving up content from our website.
Yeah,
so we are optimizing for those as well.
Yep, it's driving results. Like, people, like, I don't know how to have the stats on the top of my head, but it's like people are using that AI overview section, and it is like quickly replacing the former gold standard of the top three. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It totally is. Well, you touched on a ton of stuff right there. So let's talk about people. You talked about use cases. When you were just recently looking for someone for a while, because we had talked about that, were you looking for someone that had AI skill sets as you were searching? Or is that becoming more important in the workplace to be able to be comfortable?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question and great point. I definitely think that this year is the year where you cannot walk into like a job interview and not be thinking about how to incorporate AI or LLMs or generative AI into it. I have, again, like another quick stat here. In 2021, there were maybe in a sample set, maybe 55 postings that require generative AI skills, and now that has jumped to about 10,000. It's a must-have skill. Someone like me trying to fill a spot like a product manager, kind of unthinkable to like hire a product manager that doesn't vibe code, that doesn't know the vernacular, doesn't have their hands in there. So you need to be on top of the right AI tools for you and your particular job or skill set. It's not optional. But I think, as we've talked about too, it's like the field is changing so rapidly. It's like, which one do you use? What, like, how, like, which one, what version, what brand? So there's lack of consolidation, which we know, but just stay on top of it. Just pick a tool and stay on top of that. At least that has meaning, and that develops the competency and expertise as everything is sort of moving, and there isn't total consolidation yet. The key question in like jobs and employment, I think we all feel good that, like, if you're mid to senior level and you have your foot in the door, you can incorporate AI into your skill set, and your prospects are good. The bigger question is at the junior level, and it's, I would say, an unanswered question.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say we're hearing different stats saying that companies that adopt generative AI are dropping their junior hiring, but also I'm hearing, oh, it's, they want to limit their hiring because of where they are, and it's easy to blame AI. But like coming out of college and getting into a role, that does clearly seem to be getting harder. The need is there, and I think it's just for some of the junior folks, it's hustling, it's showing, it's the soft skill side of it. It's and using that to get your foot in the door, to get yourself into a place where you're doing the work you want to do.
It's changing, but for the juniors, it's always been about getting really good at the tactical stuff before you can take on additional responsibility. And then I think what that
Yeah,
means
totally.
today is that tactical stuff is base level knowledge of how to leverage AI tools, and coming into the workplace saying, yes, you can deploy me in, the most of the grunt work type stuff, but know that I'm going to leverage AI to make the process better, or
Right.
to make myself more efficient and effective.
And there like and right, and there is like that thing, the truth that like the junior people, they are way more AI native, AI savvy, so they really like there's a lot that they can bring to the table. But I do think it's a tough moment, and people are kind of worried, people coming out of college, rightfully so. But I think the answer isn't to like push it aside, but to jump in. So
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. Well,
yeah.
great catching up with you, Anshu. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, cool. Thanks, Deal. Bye.
All right.
All
See ya.
right, bye.